I will read you a translation of an article written by the greatest Polish mind, the most base politician in Europe, MEP, Mr. Janusz Korwin-Mikke. It's going to be about European values. The progressives regressed us to the times of slavery, because only under slavery the master can decide instead of a free man. French presidential candidate Alain Juppé declared that in the European Union, welcomed are only those countries which impose so-called European values on their citizens. What he means by European values and what we should understand as European values shall be the topic of this essay. In Europe, there used to be a common codex of values, a legacy of ancient Babylon and Egypt, used by the Jews, the Romans, the Greeks, modified severely by Christianity. It used to be a great civilization, the best one, as it dominated the world. But 150 years ago, so-called progressives appeared, that is, people who wanted to regress us into the primitive times, and after mere 6 generations, they succeeded. European values were replaced by something different. So here is the Codex. The most important principle, the basis of man's sovereignty, volenti non fit injuria, which means to a willing person injury is not done. This principle has been replaced by the idea of a welfare state, which, for people's own good, may forbid them swimming, smoking, and may order them to wear seat belts and impose social security on them. And that means it is a revert back to slavery, as only under slavery the master decides instead of a free man. In the place of the principle a murderer must be punished by death, they abolished the death penalty. That means regress the times before Hammurabi. Only primitive tribes do not know the capital punishment. In vain the great thinker Joseph de Maistre warned, "If you abolish the death penalty, you will see the whole social order crumble." And we see that happening with our own eyes. The principle "who does not work may not eat as well" was replaced by the system of unemployment benefits and food stamps. The grasshopper and the ant story was removed from schools. The result? Universal demoralization and flooding of Europe by those who would only eat but not work. The principle that a family has a head of the family which makes all the decisions has been replaced by the dialogue principle. Thus, perpetual quarrels and child demoralization in families commenced. The principle that a woman has privileges has been replaced with the equal rights principle, therefore women were condemned to daily drudgery. The result was the deterioration of family life, and children lost their home, because a home is a bird's nest to which the male invites the female. When there is no female in the house, there is no home, only a hull remains. The principle that children belong to family has been replaced with the principle that children are the property of the state. The state decides whether to vaccinate them and against what. The state decides what the school age should be and what schools are appropriate. It is okay under slavery, for when the slave child grows up, he will toil for the master, not for his parents. The master can, of course, take a child from one family and give her to another, or relocate her to a state-run foster care. The principle of diseducation was replaced by the principle of co-education. That means regression by at least 4,000 years. The quality of all-female or all-male schools is much higher than the quality of co-educational schools, but the master wishes his slaves to be dumb and ignorant. If co-education is not enough to dumb down the children, the master introduces integrated schooling, and the retardation of children slowly continues. The principle that boys should be aggressive and should partake in fights for the defense of honor, truth, faith, fatherland, women and children has been driven out. Already in nursery, boys are being mentally castrated. The master is afraid of slave rebellion, is obvious. At the same time, the masters are not afraid of an external enemy because they have agreed on the principle of fixed and unchanged borders in Europe. The principle that politics is a matter of men has been replaced by the feminization of politics, bringing more women into the political game. It's obvious women vote for the welfare state and are less prone to rebel against the master. The principle that homosexuals live quietly and unbothered, don't ask, don't tell principle and the general tolerance for harmless deviations has been replaced by the nagging imposition of homosexualism as normalcy. The principle, as you make your bed so you must lie, has been replaced by the principle forewarned is forearmed. However, the whole progress comes from taking risks. For men, risk is a normal thing. In the end, we are not afraid of riding a bike, speeding on the road, even though we are not paid to do that. The principle, a man should risk his life in defense of his women, children, and the values he believes in, has been replaced by the principle, human life is the highest value. In consequence, the head of the Danish Army Labor Union declared during a press conference that in the case of war, the first duty of a Danish soldier is to show the white flag, and you can't even fire the guy from the military because he is protected by the labor law. The principle of the faith in God has been replaced by the European Union mandated atheism. The principle of hierarchy and authority, where one man was responsible for decision-making, usually a monarch, has been replaced by democracy. In effect, majority rules, and majority consists of more stupid people than wise men. The quality of political life has been lowering dramatically, which can be seen, for example, during the presidential debates between Trump and Clinton. In practice, everything follows the scenario foreseen by Aristotle. Democracy is the rule of donkeys, led by hyenas. It is a paradox that a state runs efficiently only when taken over by a reasonable secret service agent like Vladimir Putin. In conclusion, all the genuine European values have been replaced by so-called values which are socialistic. That which is propagated by the European Union should be considered anti-civilization. If European values were the best, then the European Union values, as the reverse, are the worst. Therefore, please do not be surprised that the West is being colonized by Arabs, Berbers, Chinese, Druze, and by Zulus.